Deathblow has finally made it to the world stage, and it is doing billions on billions of damage. It's fast, it's tanky, and it is massively fun. This build can carry parties of 4 through tormented bosses and Lilith with ease. I've cleared tier 8s with it. Let me show you how well Lilith did against this build.
We stand as one, with steel in our hands, and the battle's begun. Through the fire and fury, through the darkened night, we'll battle the bosses, we'll bring forth the light. Across the countryside, my spirit is born. Mobs of hell's creatures, they rise from the ground, but I'm wielding my axe, and I won't back down. In Kryptonia Legion, we stand as one, with steel in our hands, and the battle's begun. Through the fire and fury, through the darkened night, we'll battle the bosses, we'll bring forth the light.
Okay, we're going to go over the skill. So starting at the top, we're going to do Lunging Strike just to unlock your core skills. Hammer of the Ancients is going to play a huge part in this build. Not only is it going to give us a guaranteed 40% increased damage while we overpower, which we are going to overpower all the time. We'll talk about how we're going to force overpowers later on. A really important part of this that Hammer of the Ancients really is never used for in any other build is you gain 3% more fury for 5 seconds for each enemy damaged by Hammer of the Ancients, up to 10 stacks. 30% more fury is going to be incredibly important to make sure that this build keeps running. We're going to do 1 point into Pressure Point here. That's going to unlock your next section. We're going to do 3 points into Imposing Presence for more life. Life actually increases the damage of overpower. So I don't know if you guys know this, but the more life you have, the more overpower you do. We're going to do 3 points into Martial Vigor. That's going to give you 12% damage reduction. We're only going to go through Enhanced Rallying Cry. We're not going to take Strategic or Tactical Rallying Cry. We are going to get our source of Fortify from our Paragon Board. For this build, I'm actually going to be running Iron Skin. That barrier that you're going to get, Iron Skin gives you a barrier that absorbs 601% of your maximum life. If you looked at my life, I'm running 191%. Multiply that by 6, that's the barrier that we're going to be getting. I'm not going to take any points into Outburst or Toughest Nails. We're actually going to get those later on without having to spend the skill points, because we need every single skill point we possibly can. There is no floaters. We're going to do 1 point into Warcry. We don't need Enhanced Warcry. Berserking comes from Deathblow, and it is up 100% of the time. We never have Berserking down. We're going to go 3 points into Moving Voice. This is going to increase the duration of our shouts. 3 points into Aggressive Resistance. Because we're Berserking 100% of the time, we have that 12% damage reduction 100% of the time. We're going to come down. We're going to do 3 points into Pit Fighter. This is going to give us 9% multiplicative damage to enemies that are close and some distant damage reduction. We're going to go 3 points into Slaying Strikes. At 23% increased damage against injured enemies. Injured is anything that is below 35% life. It's not anything that has just taken damage. We're going to do 1 point into Exposed Vulnerability. The way that this works is dealing damage with a weapon mastery skill, which is Deathblow, is going to make your next core skill create vulnerable on an enemy. With some of the weapons that we're going to be using, your Deathblow is going to be both a weapon mastery and a core skill, so that it means it's always going to be generating vulnerable damage. We're going to max out Deathblow here. We want to put as many points as we can into this. I have 23 ranks. This can go higher, and I'm going to try and get it higher once I get my gear into the place that I want it to be. We're going to take Enhanced Deathblow. This is a boss killer. If you want to kill some bosses real fast, this is the build for you as a barbarian. It's going to do 150% increased damage to bosses, which that's a very big number, and you notice it when you hit bosses. You're going to do Warrior's Deathblow. This is where we're getting our Berserking from. If Deathblow damages at least one enemy, it's anybody, you get Berserking for 3 seconds. So every single time that Deathblow hits, you'll get to see how fast Deathblow attacks. We will have this up every single second. We're going to do 1 point into Thick Skin so we can unlock Counteroffensive. We're going to have Fortify up all the time. So when we're over 50% of our max life as Fortify, we're going to get 12% increased damage. We're going to take 3 points into Heavy-Handed. We're going to do 3 points into Brute Force. Gives us a 24% multiplicative to Overpower damage. Overpower is life in this build, so anywhere we can get more Overpower, we're going to take it. We're going to do 3 points in a Wallop. This uses a two-handed mace. Hammer of the Ancients uses a two-handed mace, and Deathblow is using a two-handed mace. Your skills are going to deal 15% increased multiplicative damage to vulnerable enemies. We're always going to have vulnerable enemies because we're going to be running exposed vulnerability, so this will always be up as well. We're going to do 1 point into Tempered Fury, and then an absolutely 100% key to running this build is going to be Invigorating Fury. We are going to max this out. I have 8 ranks. That 24% is going to be huge. If you end up with 7 ranks, that is okay. 7 ranks is the minimum that you need this build to run. You have to be healing for at least 20% of your life each attack. And we'll get into that when we get into the gear later on and why that's important. But the more you can put into this, the better. We're going to run Wrath of the Berserker for this. Call of the Ancients is an option if you wanted to run for more attack speed and attack faster with Deathblow. I like the extra damage that we get from Wrath of the Berserker, so we're going to be running with this. We are going to be spending 200 Fury per attack, not just up to 200 Fury. Every single attack will be 200 Fury. So Wrath of the Berserker is activated immediately. As soon as we pop that and we do 1 Deathblow, we get the maximum bonus of 100% increased damage. For this, even though Unbridled Rage is going to give us less of a damage multiplier than Unconstrained, we are going to be taking Unbridled Rage. Why? Because we have to be spending at most Fury that we possibly can per hit. This is going to make Deathblow cost Fury and cost a lot of Fury. Once we get all up and running 100% of our attacks, this will be dealing 200 Fury and we'll be gaining that 45% increased multiplicative damage to your Deathblow. So that's the skill tree. We're going to go over the Paragon board next. Okay, for the starter board, we're going to be running Territorial. This is something that if you wanted to swap out for something like Exploit, you can. We don't get any extra multipliers from running vulnerable damage, and the damage to close is actually a higher additive damage than the vulnerable damage is. So if you run this here, you're going to get the 10% damage reduction from Territorial as well as higher additive damage. This works out to be a little bit better glyph than Exploit does. We always have vulnerable up anyway. In the next board, we're going to be running Decimator. Each time you make an enemy vulnerable, which we're going to do every hit, your damage is increased by 10% for 5 seconds. Overpowering a vulnerable enemy, which we overpower every 2 hits, it's guaranteed an additional 10% on top of that. So we're always going to have an additional 20% increased damage for 5 seconds because of this legendary node. Inside of this board, we're going to be running Dominate. This is going to give us additional overpower damage. This is an overpower build. We don't need that guaranteed overpower because we already are going to be guaranteeing our overpower, but this is going to give us some more damage here. The next board that we're going to be running, it's going to be the Bonebreaker board. Inside of that board, we're going to be running Might. Might is also going to give us that 8% increased damage while we're wielding a two-handed weapon, which is what we're going to be doing. Coming up, we're going to be going into the Warbringer board. This is where we get all of our Fortify from. When we spend 75 Fury, we're going to get 15% of our maximum life as Fortify. Now, we spend 200 Fury per cast. That means that we're going to be fortified all the time. Inside of this board, we're going to be running Wrath. This is going to give them extra critical strike damage, and more importantly, Every critical strike that we do, we're going to generate 3 fury. This build requires 0 critical strike chance, but it critically hits every single hit. There is not a single hit that does not crit. We have a 100% crit chance with running no critical strike chance. We'll get to that later. The next board is going to be Carnage. While berserking, critical strikes increase your attack speed by 16%, which means we're going to be having that 16% up all the time because we always are going to be critically hitting. Inside of this board, we're going to be running Crusher. A little bit of extra additive damage, but we're going to, and more importantly, be getting 20% increased overpower damage with a mace. Moving up, we're going to be going into the Blood Rage board. This one here, when killing a bleeding enemy, you have a chance to grant berserking for 5 seconds. Your damage is increased by 10% of your damage while berserking bonus up to a maximum of 30%. I'm only running 250 damage while berserking. With this build, you're going to be running under. You only have 3 legendary pieces. Everything else is going to be unique. This requires a lot of unique, so this running at 25% versus 30% actually is pretty good. Now, a lot of people ask me, where are you getting your bleeding from? We'll go over that in just a second. Inside of this board, we're going to be running Ire. It's going to give us that little extra damage while berserking, that because we need it, because we're not running any legendaries. While berserking, you take 10% reduced damage. We are berserking 100% of the time. When you're building a board for this, we need to make sure that you take every single life that you possibly can. We want to stack as much as we can. So that's why some of these go all the way out into these weird places, because we're stacking as much life as we possibly can. So that's Paragon Board. We're going to go over the skills, and all of this build, all of the little mysteries and the little hints are going to come together, and you'll see exactly how this build works. So the gear for this build is very specific. I do have some very good pieces. I've gotten very lucky. So when you're putting this build together, there's going to be a couple things when we get into the gameplay options that I'll give you as alternates in case your gear is not at this point yet and you still want to try and run this build. There are a lot of different things that you can do to get this build running, even if you don't have the gear there yet. So if your gear isn't masterworked correctly yet, or you haven't found every single piece with the perfect stats on it, I have a bunch of different things that will allow you to run the build, test it out, and see if it's something that you like to do. Starting with the helmet, we're going to be running the Crown of Lucian. What is very important about this is that it's going to increase the cost of our skills 5 times. Now, that's actually something that you want to be doing with this build. For your masterworking crits on this, you want to be running into cooldown reduction as much as possible. For your chest piece, this is one of your 3 legendary pieces. That's it. For your chest piece, you have a couple different options. We're running Iron Skin. So if you want to run Iron Warrior, that is a really great choice. For the content I was running Undying to give myself a little bit more healing has been perfectly fine. If you wanted to run Iron Warrior, that is a great option. For the affixes, we're going to be running Strength, Max Life, and then the healing received is actually on purpose. With this build, we're going to have to be healing, and we'll get to that later on in the gear, but you want to be healing as absolutely much as possible. For the masterworking crits here, I either actually wanted to run 2 points into Invigorating Fury and 1 point into your healing, or 3 points into Invigorating Fury. The tempers are going to be Invigorating Fury, which is absolutely 100% important to this. If you don't have that, this build will not run at the optimal level. So getting that is absolutely key. Now, we talked about getting bleed damage. This is the first part of getting that bleed damage. We're going to be running Outburst as your second temper. We didn't put any skill points into it, but as a utility, this is a great way to get that. It does not matter how many ranks you have into it. You just need to get at least 1 point into Outburst. For the gloves, we're going to be running Intercom. With this build, and as a boss killing build, you just stand there. If you're running through the Infernal Hordes, which you can use this build in the Infernal Hordes, I've already done tier 8 with it, you will still get that 10%. And when you find a good spot, like let's say you're standing inside of a spire, all you have to do is stand and spam. Deathblow still does need to be close. The AoE that will be created only does AoE damage. It doesn't do the damage that Deathblow does. But this is a really great option for doing a bunch of extra damage. For the tempers, we don't need to run critical strike chance at all. You run max life because life is going to increase your damage from overpower. Attack speed because we want to be attacking as fast as possible, to heal as fast as possible, and to deal as much damage as you can. And then ranks to core skills. Now, core skills are actually going to affect not just Hammer of the Ancients, but Deathblow as well. For the Tempers, this is the other half of your bleed. We have now taken your Outburst and your Tough as Nails combination and put them in utility. Final Temper is going to be damage while berserking. What Outburst and Tough as Nails are, if you go into your skill tree, you go right over to this section here. Outburst gives you thorns, and then Tough as Nails makes all of the thorns damage deal bleeding damage. So instead of wasting the points and putting them into here, we've taken utilities, which normally doesn't have super big benefit to us, and we've used that to give us more skill points. So we now have 2 additional skill points from our temporary. Going back into the gear, we're going to be running to Bolt's Will for this. The Bolt's Will gives us maximum resource, which is incredibly important. I wanted to run a triple into this, I just haven't hit my masterworking yet, but a double plus max life is actually not a bad option. We won't be taking advantage too often of the Unstoppable because we only have Rallying Cry and Wrath of the Berserker. So if those are on cooldown, we're not going to be getting any other form of Unstoppable. If you wanted to swap something like Charge in to gain additional Unstoppable, that is also an option for you. For me, right now, this is perfectly fine. We're hitting just hard enough as it is. For the boots, we're going to be running Yen's Blessing. This is where we're going to get our resistances from. This aspect on the boots is actually very nice because it's going to cast any non-mobility, which is going to be either our Warcry, our Rallying Cry, or our Iron Skin randomly if they're on cooldown. So most of the time it's going to be either Warcry or Rallying Cry. Where we really need is the elemental resistances and then your resource generation. Resources are going to be a struggle sometimes, so we need to make sure that anywhere we can get resource generation, we're getting it there. For the weapon, we're going to be running Overkill. Deathblow is going to create a shockwave, dealing up to 45% of its base damage to enemies. This part right here that I was talking about is what does extra damage on top of Deathblow. Deathblow itself still has to hit the target. The shockwave does damage also. They are completely separate. If this did 45% extra damage to Deathblow, that would be awesome, but it does not. For the masterworking crits, we're going to go as many points as we can into Deathblow. For the dual wield weapon, this is where it gets fun. Your weapon mastery skills are now core skills. The third blade takes all of your weapon mastery skills, which is Deathblow, and converts it into a core skill. So now Deathblow is a core and a weapon mastery skill. That's where, when you go into the skill tree and you look at your exposed vulnerability, dealing direct damage with a weapon mastery skill, Deathblow, causes your next core skill, Deathblow, to make an enemy vulnerable. So using this blade is very, very important, and that is now why we can spam Deathblow, because it is a core skill. So you can spam this as many times as you want. Your weapon mastery skills are now core skills that have no cooldown. So that's why Deathblow has no cooldown. You can just spam it as many times as you want, but they cost Fury. So weapon mastery skills normally don't cost Fury. Deathblow costs nothing, but has a cooldown. Now it costs something and has no cooldown, which is what's making this build work. It's dealing increased damage, which is above the normal. The Fury cost is reduced by 5 for any additional charges. We won't have any additional charges for Deathblow, but you will for your Steel Grasp, which we don't even need to be running Steel Grasp with this build. For the Masterworking crits, you want to go triple strength if you can. If you can't go triple strength, then you can go strength, Fury on kill. That's going to help keep your Fury up, which I'm telling you, Fury is going to be kind of an issue here. For the other weapon, we're going to be running the Doombringer. The reason we're running this is that max life. 77% maximum life, and with a GA there, if you guys are lucky enough to get it, I haven't gotten one, it's going to be a massive amount of life. You need more life because life is going to make Deathblow hit harder. This also grants you some damage reduction, which is incredibly important with this build. For your slashing weapon, we're going to be running the Grandfather. Maximum resources for a triple is what I wanted. It's not what I got. If you can get a triple here, we want to do that because we want to be running a lot of resources. For the ring, this is your last legendary piece. This is the aspect that pulls the entire build together. Without this on, this build doesn't run. The aspect is going to be Starlight. You gain 40 of your primary resource for every 20% of your life that you heal. Remember, we took Invigorating Fury in your skill tree right here. You heal 24% of your maximum life for every 100 Fury that you spent. Deathblow will be costing 200 Fury, so now we're going to be healing 48% of our life per cast. We also took additional healing here so that we heal even more. I'm also running Undying, which is healing me even more. You can overheal as much as you want to for this build. They're going to be changing that next season. But for now, you can overheal as absolutely much as possible. The more you overheal, the more Fury you gain. That's why we're running this incredibly great aspect and a lot of fun aspect this season. This will change, but for now, take advantage of it, play it. It is a ton of fun. It is not broken. It's working exactly as intended, but they didn't realize how strong this was actually going to be. For the affixes, you're going to be running Strength, Maximum Life, Attack Speed. I actually did get most of the master working that I wanted on this. If you wanted to go into resource generation, you could. If you wanted to get a little bit more out of your damage while berserking, you could do that too. But attack speed is going to be important because we want to be attacking very quickly. For your other ring, we're going to be running the Ring of Red Fury. This has maximum resources on it. Double and a single is exactly what I wanted. Now, remember I told you, we do not need any critical strike chance. This is why. After spending 100 Fury within 3 seconds, your Hammer of the Ancients, Upheaval, or Deathblow is guaranteed to critical strike and do 40% increase critical strike damage bonus. We spend 200 Fury per cast, which means we guarantee both Hammer of the Ancients and Deathblow to critically strike every single time, no matter what. So this is going to be key to making sure that we always crit. And then to tie it all together, we're going to go into the Banished Lord's Talisman. More max life. I'm on the fence now with this. I haven't tested it out. I have a couple things to test with this. Is max life better? Is the attack speed better? Or is the ranked core skills better? I'm going to test it out and I'm going to have the planner updated. I will have a post-edit version if I find something else that is different or works better or doesn't work as well. So when you go into the Mobalytics planner, that is going to be the optimal setup. Make sure you check it out because it's going to be in the description of this video. Follow along the planner there and then look for the variant after it posts if you're going to see any changes. If you hop in and you see me running something different than what is posted in this video, check the planner because I'm going to try and keep this updated as much as I can. After you spend 275 of your primary resources, your next core skill is guaranteed to overpower. Deathblow is now a core skill. So now we are guaranteeing overpowering on your Deathblow every time that we've attacked twice. And then eventually we're going to attack twice and get double overpowers because of the amount of Fury that we're spending for Deathblow. So that 275 gets done with just 2 swings. It is pretty crazy. For the gems, as you can see, we're running full life. The reason that we're running full life is if you look in your overpower stat here, further increase at the moment of impact based on your maximum life and fortified amount. Overpower gains additional damage based on your maximum life and your maximum fortify. The more life we have, the more fortify we have, the more damage we're going to do. That's why it's very important to run your Doombringer, your Banished Lords, all of your gems. In your weapons, you want to be running overpower damage, so those rubies are going to be there. I am slightly under cap for my armor. I haven't noticed it really affecting me at all, but right now I'm running skulls in each one of my gems because we're running Yen's Blessing that has a greater affix for resistance. So my resistances are all maxed. My armor is just a little bit under. Strength will help that. I wanted to get a triple into strength here. If I got my triple into strength, my armor would go up just a little bit. You can move the Paragon board around a little bit if you want to get a little bit more strength. So there's a couple different options for you to get. But this is what the gear looks like for the Deathblow build. For the expertise, we're going to be running your two-handed axe. The way that expertise works, you don't actually have to be using a two-handed axe in order to run the technique. This gives you that 10% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. They're going to be vulnerable all the time without having to run an axe. So we still are able to run Deathblow on the two-handed mace, which is what our weapon selection is going to be. Deathblow does not have to run a two-handed mace. Deathblow has the option of running the Grandfather or your dual-wield weapons. We're running Overkill. It's specifically because of our skill points. We're going to be running 15% increased damage to vulnerable enemies when you're using a bludgeoning weapon. So that's the skill setup right there. Next is the gameplay loop. So for the gameplay for this, a couple different things. This is your Banished Lord's Talisman buff right here. We don't really need to worry about it because it's going to be procced all the time. This is your intercom buff. I am running an Elixir of Fortitude. This gives me up to 191,000 life. You don't need to worry about the Dominate glyph right here. That's what this is. To start this out, I'm actually going to pop Wrath of the Berserker, Rallying Cry, and then I'm going to Hammer of the Ancients. This is just for using in the training grounds. Because this is going to make a Deathblow cost 80, we want to make sure that I get enough Fury to start my rotation here. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to pop Wrath of the Berserker, then Rallying Cry, and then Hammer of the Ancients here, and now we're at full. One cast goes up to 120, now we're at 152, now we're at 176, and now we're at 200 Fury cost. That means I have 234 Fury. With this has to be perfect. You have to have enough generation. You have to make sure you're generating 200 Fury minimum. Hammer of the Ancients, remember, is going to stack and give us some Fury generation. So when you use Hammer of the Ancients, that's the debuff right there. So you see how I have that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's giving us a whole bunch of extra Fury generation. So as we build up our stacks, we're getting more and more Fury generation. So as you're going, we're just going to start using Deathblow. You want to make sure that you're constantly adding in 1 or 2 stacks of Hammer of the Ancients in between. It has to be once every 5 seconds. It doesn't have to be every single second that you're doing it. So you just don't want to make sure those stacks don't drop off, and you will never run out of Fury. Now, as you're going, if you want to, and let's say that you're running in between monsters and you pop Rallying Cry, if your stacks do fall off from Hammer of the Ancients, you still don't lose Fury, because Rallying Cry gives you Fury generation. Wrath of the Berserker is the same way, but without Hammer of the Ancients up, or without Rallying Cry, I ended up at 197 Fury. That's why it's incredibly important to run your rotation. Make sure you're using Hammer of the Ancients, fills up your Fury, and then go back to Deathblow. As long as I keep those stacks of Hammer of the Ancient on, you just don't run out of Fury. So you need to make sure that you keep those up, and then you just run Deathblow. And then all you have to do is just run your cooldowns as you go. Make sure you keep your Hammer of the Ancients up, because that's going to give you your 4. Now, when you're hammering, make sure, I saw my Hammer of the Ancients hit an overpower there, so I know that that's going to be that extra 40%. If you hit and it doesn't overpower, you have to do it again to get that extra 40% damage. So it does require a little bit of paying attention to, but this is what it looks like. So if you can see, there's 2 numbers. You see one small one and one big one. The small number is your... The small number is the blast wave from running Overkill. It doesn't do as much as Deathblow itself does. So when you're right up close to something, Deathblow itself does all of the extra damage. That's where your big numbers come from. It's Deathblow actually hitting, and then you get a whole bunch of the extra damage, which will kill monsters in a horde run on its own. If you're still working on this build, and you don't quite have the generation or the Fury cost, things that you can do is if you go to Unbridled Rage and you switch to Unconstrained, this is an option for you too. It's still going to do damage. You just won't overpower it quite as often here. So it's an option for you if you cannot maintain Unbridled Rage. Another option for you if you still want to run Unbridled Rage so that you do more damage. You can also use an Elixir of Resourcefulness. This will allow you to spam overpower as much as you want. You don't even need to be hitting a target to be spamming overpower. you can just spam it right out in the middle of the open. Because of that resource cost reduction, you're going to be generating enough fury every single cast to just cast out in the open. So there's a couple different things that if you wanted to really get this build going, if you haven't quite got the gear or masterworking set up yet, those are great options for you. So that's how this build comes together as a whole. You have to make sure you keep your stacks of Hammer of the Ancient up. You have to alternate all your resource generation from Rallying Cry and from Wrath of the Berserker, and then you just spam Warcry on cooldown. It is a lot of fun to play. It's fast paced. The AoE does lack a little bit, but I'm working on that with Hammer of the Ancients. I'll have a variant out if I get that fixed. Let me know what you think of the build in the comments. I'm super excited for you guys to try this out. I'm live on YouTube and Twitch every night. Stop by Theorycraft with me.